Dyslexic thinking. 4 out of 5 dyslexics attribute dyslexic thinking to their success. Dyslexic thinking has created some of the world's greatest inventions, brands, and art. Dyslexic thinking is a combination of some or all of the following: visualizing, interacting with space, senses, physical ideas, and with new concepts; imagining, creating an original piece of work or giving ideas a new spin; communicating, crafting and conveying clear, engaging messages; reasoning, understanding patterns, evaluating possibilities, and making decisions; connecting, understanding self, connecting, empathizing, and influencing others; exploring, being curious and exploring new ideas in a consistent and energetic way. To take our dyslexic thinking test, go to madebydyslexia.org.
Well, dyslexia is the most common learning difficulty that impairs a person's ability to read and write. It affects approximately 15% of the worldwide population, regardless of culture, language, age, and gender. Now, about 5 to 10% of school-going children have some form of dyslexia. Now, some fun facts you didn't know about this condition are that dyslexics have a strong ability to see the big picture. 50% of people with dyslexia are left-handed, and interestingly, only 11% of the total population is left-handed. Now, the dyslexic brain is actually larger and typically much more creative than the average brain. But how far true are these facts, and what else is known about dyslexia? Well, stay tuned, because our topic today is dyslexia. And to help us understand this condition better is an expert panel comprised of a clinical psychologist, principal from a remedial school, a Davis Dyslexia Correction Facilitator, and joining us from our Devon studio is the director of the Dyslexic Association of South Africa. Be part of the show by asking the panel some questions or simply just sharing your views with us. The number to call is join us at 714-5861 or 5877. You can also tweet us at SABC Health Talk or simply interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. So sit back, relax, and learn from this bumper show coming to you just after a short break. I'm Dr. Salome Daung, and this is Health Talk.
Public Protector Mosisiwe Mkhwebane's fitness to hold office is currently under question.
It's about the comments that was made by the court. Istina matter. She didn't investigate that matter at all.
Advocate Tulima Donzela has previously said that she doesn't want Ms. Mkhwebane to be judged on the work that she did. We can't get away from that inevitability, can we?
I mean, I think she's being judged on her performance in office and the number of cases that have been taken on review that she has lost. She keeps challenging and appealing these decisions and keeps losing in all of the courts in the country. And it is on that basis that she's being judged.
She made it possible. I would not have wanted her to be judged that way. Let's be fair to her. Let the process not only be fair, but be seen to be fair. And let her just calm down and chill and allow this process to run its course.
All right, so we're going to learn more about this condition called dyslexia, and it's a great pleasure to welcome our special guest who's going to help us navigate through this topic. First up is Benedict Mhlongo, who's a psychologist based at the Psychology and Wellness Center out in Bryanston. Welcome to Health Talk.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Doctor.
Right, and then we also have Jan Viljoen. Now, Jan is a dyslexia correction facilitator. And he's here to help us with this condition, and he's got a wealth of knowledge. Welcome to Health Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Right. And of course, in our Devon studios, we have Sharon Gherkin. Now, Sharon is Director of Dyslexic Association of South Africa. Welcome to Health Talk, Sharon.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to come back to you just now. Let's start with you here, Benedict. Dyslexia. what exactly are we talking about? Is this a medical condition? Is it a psychiatric condition? Is it classified as a disability? How would you describe it in basic terms?
I'd actually say it's a learning disorder that is characterized by an inability to understand words and actually write.
Right.
So it's actually mostly around that impairment of actually that ability of learning and writing actually.
All right. Okay. So I mean, when kids grow, clearly they don't know how to read and write. You know, when does it become a disorder? When would you say this is a disorder now?
I'd say actually early in life, as you put it. I mean, kids are not actually prone to reading as early as at 2 years or so, but in terms of how they respond to language, in terms of how to actually respond to any written or verbal thing, be it drawing, be it anything, you can actually start noticing earlier in those early years in terms of just giving them that stimulation.
All right.
Yeah.
So I mean, in your world and the psychiatric world, conditions have specific criteria that they need to meet in order for them to meet the diagnostic criteria. Are there any such with dyslexia?
No, there are. There's quite actually a vast symptoms to meet a particular criteria, specifically to dyslexia. Sorry, an inability to write, an inability to read, and also a tend of shyness. There's also anxiety involved, because I mean, now seeing myself as special, any type of the form, and also the stigma. Yeah. There's a lot of actually criteria or symptoms that one actually need to ascertain the particular disorder. But also anxiety, we can never rule out the anxiety. There's always anxiety in terms of performance, in terms of actually expressing what you actually can do or can't do.
Right. So Jan, just tell us something. How much is known about dyslexia?
Unfortunately, not much, and that is not something we are lagging behind in South Africa. It's basically all over the world. I can basically talk about the Western world because our figures from Asia and from Africa is not that available yet. But dyslexia now is regarded in 1 in 5 persons might be having dyslexia. That includes now kids up to senior adults. That figure is still getting higher, not probably because more people are born with it, but I think more people come forward. The stigma is gone because dyslexia is not a disease. It's not the illness. It's not a mental disability. It's got nothing. It's just another way of thinking. And that is what worries me often, is that there are so many of the specialties and facets in the remedial world that focus on other stuff that actually has nothing to do with that. For instance, drug medication, which as far as I know has never been successful in teaching somebody to read if you take a tablet every day and so on.
But it's interesting you say that. I mean, it's not a disability, it's not a medical condition. So why do we need to worry about it, though?
You know, if you want to teach a fish to climb a tree, no? For the rest of his life he will try it, but he will regard himself as very stupid and idiotic and so, because he can't do that. So the disability comes in where the school system, the educational system is in, does not know what dyslexia is and how to handle a kid with dyslexia.
All right, let's cross over to our Devon studio and speak to Sharon Gerken. Sharon, firstly, tell us about your association, Dyslexic Association of South Africa. What do you guys do?
You know what, I think it's to teach people about what dyslexia is. As the panel has previously said, is that it is the inability to understand what dyslexia is that it's not a teacher's fault, and it's not a parent's fault that they don't understand what dyslexia is. And if we look at South Africa and its environment, when we have 50 children in a class, if we're lucky enough to have 35, is that a teacher can only teach to the middle of the class. And the dyslexic gets lost because, yes, they are intelligent, and yes, they think differently, and yes, the system is not set up for a right brain thinking child. But how do we, as a South African society, teach people to acknowledge that there are dyslexic children in the class? At the moment, these dyslexic children just get left behind. If you can't cope with the system and you can't afford to do remedial work, what actually happens to this child, and how do we empower teachers to understand what dyslexia is, and how we can help it in the classroom. And yes, we know that it's almost down to a gene now, and that it runs in families. And if we don't start to help at fundamental ground basis on teaching people how to acknowledge it and where to help and what can be done, and learning the rights of the child, these children just get lost in our system. And my hope is that we teach people what dyslexia is.
All right. Talk about what dyslexia is. You touched on a little bit about, the fact that it affects 1 in 5 people. And in my introduction, I said about 15% of the population. Do you have exact statistics, perhaps, in the country?
Not really, actually. The prevalence in this country is not accustomed to it being growing, but it's just more awareness that's actually more invested in this country right now. But in terms of stance, I think it's actually still 1 in 5.
1 in 5.
Yeah.
More boys than girls, girls than boys.
And also in South Africa, it's...
Yeah. Carry on, Sharon.
In South Africa, it's a really hard thing to determine, because I would say that it's how many of our society, or how many of the children in rural schools cannot be tested for it. So I would even say in South Africa we might be slightly higher, because we cannot, as your psychologist will say, is that to actually determine it, we need to do a battery of tests to say that somebody's definitely dyslexic. And to do those tests at the moment is not happening. So it's a really hard number, and if that's worldwide, where education systems are a lot better than in South Africa, I would be very interested to see what the numbers in South Africa could really be.
All right. Back to our studio in Johannesburg here. We haven't spoken about, we said that it's an ability to read and write. Is that it, in terms of clinical symptoms, of this, let's call it a condition for now?
No, not really, actually. It's more informed by the comorbidity of other disorders that might inform dyslexia. But in terms of it just seeing this is actually dyslexia, it's really hard to actually tell. But there are a lot of clinical symptoms where we can actually look at ADHD, we can actually look at autism, we can look at dysphoria, even dyspraxia also. There's a lot of comorbidity in that actually gives us the clinical indications that actually can lead us to dyslexia.
I see. Okay, so it might be hidden in all other sort of conditions.
It's really hard to classify or diagnose.
All right. Well, I think this is a good point for us to go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on dyslexia and look at how it impacts, the sufferers and those around them. Please stay with us.
Cape Town law enforcement officers, backed by members of the South African police, moved in and started dismantling dwellings and picking personal possessions of the foreign nationals.
So all these families, they have nowhere to go.
The city of Cape Town is not insensitive to the plight of the refugees, but we simply cannot allow the situation to carry on unchecked.
Every day you're talking about the TV, women abuse, child abuse. Look this woman, look this child. Why are you going to abuse us?
It's the largest annual gathering of women's rights anywhere in the world, but the impact of COVID-19 is causing disruptions with far-reaching consequences.
But in a meeting of member states, South Africa argued strongly for a complete postponement.
Let's postpone this year's W until all the women can gather.
The UN calendar does not allow us.
Welcome back. We're talking dyslexia, and with our guests here, Benedict Mhlongo, and in our Durban studio, Sharon Gherkin. We also have Jan Viljoen, and we're now joined by another special guest, Alison Scott. Now, Alison is principal of Bella Vista School. Welcome to Health Talk, Alison.
Thank you very much.
All right. You've heard the discussion so far. We were talking about dyslexia, trying to describe what dyslexia is. Do you perhaps want to just add your perspective of how you see dyslexia, and how, obviously in your world around, teaching environment,
I think what's important to us is while we have a label dyslexia, we also have individual children who may be experiencing dyslexia, difficult engaging language and words, especially when you put that into a written context. And that child enters our system called school, and that difficulty then explodes to quite a broad impact. Impact on attention, the environment the child finds themselves in is either punitive or supportive, feeling overwhelmed, anxiety steps up, no one knows what's going on. We see children struggling with stigma. Am I not smart? Why can't I do this? And so those opportunities to screen for children with reading difficulties present from a young age. And if we don't screen and intervene, and by intervene I really believe our viewpoint is a intensive intervention, multidisciplinary intervention.
All right. Before we talk about
interventions,
I mean, you spoke about screening, and earlier on we were talking about how this condition is diagnosed. Now, in a school environment, how does a teacher diagnose or kind of notice that there's a problem with this child?
We've got curriculum standards and we've got expectations of how children will engage language at different ages and stages. The difficulty with dyslexia is it is a spectrum. You could fall anywhere on that spectrum of difficulty with words. So for some children it might present quite obviously and apparently, and they're young. They're battling to get onto the task, disorganized, struggling with time, rhyming isn't coming as you might expect it to be. They're not retaining phonemes and sounds, putting it together to make the words. There's a global difficulty with the language orientation at school.
All right. Back to you, Benedict. I mean, earlier we said dyslexia can actually hide within a whole lot of other conditions. But do we know the causes? I mean, is it possible for us to say what are the causes and risk factors for this condition?
That's actually a difficult one, Doc. I mean, there's a lot of research that's actually still done. For instance, there's research that's actually been done actually alluding to it being a genetic factor that actually it's hereditary. You can actually inherit from your parent up until down. There's also another factor that I've been reading more about recently that, for instance, in early childhood, if a child has an ear infection, if it actually goes untreated, can also lead to having a dyslexia. So there's a lot, even TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, there's a lot that we need to rule out first. But in terms of it being a risk factor, I'd say it's actually pretty mild, but there's a lot of other things that we can actually venture into actually alluding to this is actually dyslexic, and this actually is caused by this.
Right.
And if we think about identifying dyslexia, we first look at risk for dyslexia. So before we even say this child or this adult is dyslexic, we've seen as risk factors either improve or diminish over time. So when a child has had intense benefit of intervention and still there's failure to read or significant anxiety about reading, we begin to be more comfortable to use the label. But,
so let's talk about how it impacts then. I mean, I know we've started talking a little bit about it, from a child, perspective. Jan, how does this impact, even, let's just start with the child and then talk about those around the child.
Okay, it's not for me in my practice strange to have an 8-year-old a child with already on mood-changing medicine, the stuff they give for ADD and so on, plus antidepressants. First of all, that child, due to his battle to progress in school, his self-esteem is usually very, very down. He's in a constant state of anxiety because he knows that he is not dumb or stupid or slow, whatever the nasty word may be. He knows he's capable of much more, but his tests doesn't show that. Parents say that they spend an afternoon with their kids, let's say, studying a part of biology, and but they help them orally and they question them from all sorts of angles. You see, this child knows biology just like that. And tomorrow, after the written test, 27%. Now, what went wrong? And very few people up to now make the link between the written and the spoken word. Now, dyslexia, basically the word dys, part of it is No, not like dissatisfied, disappear, you know. And lexia comes from lexis, the Greek for read, for words, actually. So written words, printed words is a problem. Now, why is that then? And that's what many parents ask. Why is it that my child shows all types of signs that he is bright? He's got a high intelligence, he grasps difficult matters very fast, and so, but he doesn't make any programs in the school testing system. And the answer basically is that, well, from my background, Davis' theory is that you've got more or less two types of thinkers. The one is your verbal thinker. I'm a verbal thinker. I hear a stream of words rush through my mind if I think about something. If I see table, I see the word table, I know exactly what it is. I don't have to search around for a picture of a table. The dyslexic person is a sensory visual thinker. He thinks in terms of pictures. So when he sees the printed word table, he wants to call up a picture of table. Now that's very easy. He stores all his information in terms of pictures. And but now, in any language, there are a number of words that do not have pictures.
Right.
Like the, and, but, although, there are 220 of them in English language, which do not evoke a picture. Now, when the child reads that sentence, and these words appear in every sentence, they're part of the ground face sight words.
Yeah.
And so on. Now, when he encounters that word, he doesn't know what it is, there's no picture for it, and he gets confused. Now his dyslexic ability. That's when we start to talk about the gift of dyslexia.
Yeah.
Now that kicks in.
We're studying another interesting one, and the gifts. Yeah. You know, that's essentially the other side of it. We also need to speak to Sharon in Devon, but before that, we have Lorraine on the line from Cape Town. Lorraine, welcome. Lorraine, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Hi, Lorraine. Go ahead, please.
Hi. My elder son had dyslexia very badly.
Right.
You know, the two younger one after him, my little girl, when she went to school, she could read fluently already before she went to school. So I was trying so hard to teach him. And right through school, you know, he was always, you know, disturbed his learning. Anyway, when he went to do his army training, he had to speak Afrikaans mostly, you know. He wrote to me in Afrikaans, and then he started speaking Afrikaans, and then he started speaking English books, and then he started writing English books. It was quite a thing. Being taught Afrikaans helped him in his English. You know, the way you say things in Afrikaans is just like you see it, but English is not always the same. So that helped him very, very much. So in the end, he could read properly.
Interesting one. The influence of language, the impact of language on this. But let's move over to Durban and speak to Sharon. Sharon, you've heard what we've been talking about, and here's a very interesting call around the impact of language, you know, starting to speak Afrikaans and read Afrikaans, and that suddenly changed. Your comments?
My comment is also I'm an adult dyslexic, and what a lot of, you know, we put a lot of focus on children and dyslexia, and obviously I absolutely agree with the headmistress or the teacher from Bella Vista, and that how we look at it in children and how it starts to manifest. But I hear calls daily from adults that are really struggling in South Africa when they have a diagnosis of dyslexia. Where do you get help? What job can you do if you're really battling to read and write? Because as it is said, it's really the inability to understand what you're reading. It's your ability to take thought and put it down on paper is so limited if you've had no intervention, and it is vital that we get these children a multi-sensory, multi-dimensional intervention from a very young age. But what do we do with the adults that are stuck with dyslexia? I wish that we had technical schools in South Africa where we could send people that are not left-brained, that we could get them educated to do plumbing or building or doing something where they're really gifted in because they're three-dimensional thinkers. We have a multi-diverse problem here. It's not only just with children, because we know that it's almost down to a gene. It's definitely hereditary. If you look at it, in my family, it definitely follows through. Both my sons have it, and my eldest son is also autistic. it definitely follows. And we've left with a society that is really concerned about children but forgets about the adult with a learning problem, specifically dyslexia.
Very interesting one. I mean, does that say then that if you have a child with dyslexia, this child will grow on to become an adult with dyslexia? Is that the case?
Yes, it is. It's the same as with autism, actually, you mentioned.
Yes.
With teenagers, it's the same.
Definitely.
Very interesting. Now,
we're looking not to cure dyslexia.
Yeah.
Is that I remain a dyslexic even though I'm adult and I'm high functioning, is that if you look at my written work, you'll notice that my grammar is really weak and my spelling is not the strongest in the world. And if you both look at my sons who have both managed to get degrees, is that they had to have spelling concessions and extra time, and were these things not allowed to them, they wouldn't have got as far as they did. So it's not a disability that we grow out of, and I definitely like to call it a disability because we as dyslexics, if I work for a boss and I'm required to do a certain amount of reading, and we have more and more that is put up on a screen nowadays, that we have to answer emails, and my processing of that information is that much slower. I need more time to be able to put my thought down on paper. And is a person that employs an adult dyslexic aware of this? And how many times do I not hand in things or not given things as a high school student just because I don't have the extra time that's required for me to process that information and get my thought down onto paper?
Sharon, this is really, really getting interesting. Before we go on a break, though, we have Francina on the line from Gauteng. Francina, welcome. Is Francina there? No, Francina is not there. Okay, we'll try and get Francina back on the line. But for now, another quick break, and we're back with you soon. Please stay there.
From your organisation perspective, a good move?
Of course, yes. We as an organisation wholeheartedly welcome these special remission.
What does radical restructuring even mean?
Well, it means cutting deep. It looks like they need to remove about 2,000 staff, so that's radical stuff.
He's talking once again of a restructuring that we've done plenty of times. So to scapegoat Saka Numsa is highly irresponsible instead of dealing with the corruption and rot at this entity.
I could not accept the level of unconstitutionality that Minister Twele was now going through. I said to him that he doesn't have this authority to appoint people as ambassadors.
World Health Organization has called on countries to boost their readiness against the COVID-19 coronavirus, saying that the virus is literally knocking at their countries' doors.
Stocks have plunged dramatically amid fears of the rapid spreading of coronavirus into other countries outside of China.
Nobody thought that Iran would be having this problem.
Nigeria has announced its first confirmed case of the novel coronavirus, which is also the first for sub-Saharan Africa.
All Chinese nationals will be forbidden from entering Russia because Moscow now believes that the Chinese outbreak is much riskier. Now cases have topped.
The confirmed number of new cases globally has passed 80,000 as the outbreak continues to grow.
For years, dyslexic children in Soweto accessing remedial school has always been a costly and a difficult exercise until Tlokomela Remedial School opened its doors.
Yes, true. So the school is the first of its kind in Soweto. It opened its doors in 2017 on the 16th of January. Yeah, so that we are able to cater for learners with specific learning difficulties. In the main learners who are dyslexic. And these learners are referred to us by the psychologists from the Department of Education. Even hospitals like Bara, they do refer learners. However, we send them to the department to get the LSIN numbers, and the psychologists will ensure that this is a candidate for Tlokomelo.
What sort of programs are there for learners?
Yes, the programs that we have is computerized ones. And these programs, they do mathematics, they do English, they also do life orientation. Learners interact directly with the computer. It shows them the pictures, and they use the keyboard to be able to choose the letters that they are supposed to use. Even when it's mathematics, it's the same program that they use. However, the programs are different, and the learners are very much interested in these programs. We have seen an improvement in learner attendance, in interest on learning.
Remedial schools are known for charging exorbitant amounts because of the services they provide. Is it the same with this township remedial school?
Everything that you see here, the Department of Education is the one that allocate funds for running all the programs that you see. And some it's just sponsors who would come for donation of computers and tablets. But learners are not paying even a cent in the school. Even for meals, we've got a feeding scheme provided to by the department. So it's the government that runs everything. And also the government has given us support structures in the form of therapists who will be able to look at the different challenges that the learners have.
All right, well, talk about remedial schools, special schools, and so on. We have somebody more appropriate to, enlighten us a little more about that. And that's Alison Scott, who's principal of Bella Vista School. Now, Alison,
yes.
We've spoken earlier about the ability of teachers to detect, children with dyslexia. But let's come back to the school environment.
Yes.
Are we saying that children with dyslexia need to go to a special school?
It's a lovely, touchy topic. I do believe the environment that the dyslexic child is placed into can make or break the progress. So if a mainstream school is able to screen and intervene, can differentiate, will create opportunities and accommodations for this child, and above all build self-esteem, create a place of safety, I'd say that placement in a special school isn't necessarily indicated. But that inclusive model is not widespread. Yeah. So these children often need, more than anything, a respite. They need a break from the relentless system, which is paper, pen tasks at a desk.
So, okay, so a few things about, we've just watched this clip on Tlokomelo School in Soweto.
Can I chip in? Very excited about the clip.
Yeah, and perhaps tell us about Bella Vista School.
Right.
What sort of kids do you have there and so on, yeah?
So Bella Vista School has an assessment centre. It is a school of about 240 children, age grade R to 7. And then we have a professional development arm where we do specific teacher training in dyslexia. So we have an 18-month program to train teachers, dyslexia awareness, etc. But what was exciting about Tlokomelo's clip is I recognized the school, and they're using tablet devices there with a literacy app, which we were really fortunate to be able to be involved in developing, Feed the Monster. Feed the Monster delivers literacy in all 11 languages up to a mid-grade 2 level.
Right.
On a tablet device.
Yeah.
Why I raise that is that technology for children with dyslexia could be key and instrumental in overcoming environmental barriers.
Right.
Speech-to-text software, text-to-speech software, independence. They may not be reading with automaticity, or as you and I are, we obliged to read words when we see them, but they can deploy text to get around load and the demand and remain intact.
All right.
Yeah.
I believe Francina is back on the line. Francina from Gauteng. Welcome, Francina.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you, Francina?
Fine. My name is Francina. I want to know, because I have that problem. I don't know how to read, how to write, but I'm working, I'm cleaning, I'm working at a cleaner at UJ. So, but the problem is I want to know how to write and read and write, but I don't know. Since from at school.
Right.
So I finish the school at grade 9 because of I see I have a problem, but I did try it. I don't know where I can find help.
Excellent question. Stay there. Let's see if we can get help. Addison, perhaps you want to help.
I firmly believe that a person with dyslexia can learn to read at any age.
Right.
I think it's increasingly difficult from your esteem point of view, and you need to develop a very strong trust with the interventionist or the facilitator. But to take yourself through to identifying this is dyslexia would be useful, and to seek intervention. And I believe that there's hope for Francina. I think that she could, and perhaps even within UJ, who do work with dyslexia and remedial work, she could find some support within that structure as well.
All right. Yeah, and I will come back to you. I just do need to go across to our Devon studio and speak to Sharon. Sharon, I'm sure you have one or two words to add to the discussion around dyslexia and learning. And perhaps, you're welcome to chip in on Francina's call that we've just had now.
Francina's a call that I get daily about people that have obviously fallen out of the schooling system as adults because they cannot get help. But I do agree with Alison, is that we as dyslexics can learn to read at any age. And I sometimes think the older we are, the better that remedial is for us, because we are determined to be able to read, and we see the great necessity in our lives to be able to read. So I do think that there is hope for her and we can get her taught. But this is a call that I get at least 10 times a day where people are phoning and saying they've heard that there's something called dyslexia. Could they possibly have it? And how do they go about getting a job? Can we get a piece of paper that states that they're dyslexic, so when they apply for a job, the pressure's on them to read and write on that's great. Even waiters and waitresses nowadays have to be able to write out what the client wants and hand it to a kitchen. So it is a big problem, but I do agree that adult dyslexics can learn to read and write, and well. Maybe not as good as anybody else, but they definitely can.
All right.
So there is hope for Francis.
All right. Let's come back to you, John. Jan, we're talking obviously learning and, dyslexia. So as we described, kids go through different phases in a day where everything is normal and then suddenly dyslexia strikes, if I can put it that way. What triggers this?
Okay, as I said earlier, we view the majority of people with dyslexia as picture thinkers. In other words, when they read a sentence, there are words in the sentence, and each word calls up a picture familiar to them. But now there are certain words that do not have pictures. It can be the so-called sight words, the and prepositions and so on. It can also be a new word that they've not encountered before. Now, when they encounter that word, they don't know what that word is adding to the sentence. And that confuses then the meaning of the sentence. And the moment they are confused, they go into their dyslexia mode of disorientation. In that sense, disorientation means he goes into his imagination. Whereas I have millions of words, I hope, still at my age, available for me to use, he's got pictures. So he goes into his imagination and he's looking for a picture that he that can give meaning to the sentence. If he finds it, it's fine. Most of the time, he will not, because there are no pictures for those words. Now he's in that state of confusion. Confusion makes him now apply certain techniques. He can try shortcuts. He can guess the word. He omit the word. He replace the word. Sometimes it works. Most of the time, it doesn't work. Now he's starting making mistakes. That mistakes is very strenuous on him, because for nobody it is nice to make mistakes and to be shown it, especially in a class full of other people. So that then puts frustration, that puts anxiety, that gives him low self-image, that he might later on rather keep quiet and not answer any questions. When it's time to read aloud in class, which is a very, very bad thing for dyslexics, he will try all sorts of tricks not to read. He will go to the toilet and not come back. He will be naughty and sit outside and so on. So if there's a subject where there's little reading, let's say woodwork or stuff, hands-on stuff, of course then it won't bother him so much.
Before we run out of time, let's take Sheila on the line from Soweto. Sheila, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you, Sheila?
I'm good. I'm one of the adults who have dyslexic. I'm in my 20s.
Right.
Well, I think at school they noticed that I have a problem, but no one really cared to help me. And well, I do struggle with reading and writing. Sometimes I do swap letters. Sometimes when I hear the word, I'm just going to write it with an F, not a P. So even now I do want to study further, but it becomes a problem because I can't really read and write, especially another second language like Zulu, Xhosa, anything. And when it comes to job employment, there's where I lost a job because of I struggle with reading children's names. So it's really hard for me.
All right. Okay. Well, stay tuned because I'm sure organizations like Dyslexic, Association of South Africa, can be of help to you. Alison, do you want to perhaps comment?
If I could just add, when we're talking about reading and processing of words and language, we're talking milliseconds of processing function.
Yeah.
So you've got 150 milliseconds to match that visual image with a word bank stored in your mind. A person with dyslexia needs more time than that. Milliseconds more. It's not ages of delay, but it's enough to unravel them. And they need opportunity to overlearn. They need opportunity perhaps to sub-vocalize or speak while they're reading.
I'll tell you what,
etc.
we're going to focus on that a lot more in the next segment. I just would like to cross over to Devon and give the last 30 seconds to Sharon. Sharon, perhaps you might want to have a word or two just as your final thoughts, perhaps having in mind the call from Sheila.
I think that Alison understands dyslexia better than most. I absolutely acknowledge what she's saying, and I think that she definitely will be a great help. But any adult that's out there is more than welcome to give me a call. I give advice freely, and I will point them in the right direction and hope that we can find a way out or a way forward for them. But there is a way forward, and if we can get it diagnosed, we can get them help and or jobs where the requirement for them to read and write is a lot less.
All right, okay. We do have the contact details of Dyslexic Association of South Africa, and you're welcome to just scribble down those numbers and the web address. And at this point, I'd like to say thank you so much, Sharon, who's Director of Dyslexic Association of South Africa. All the best. Time for another quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion on dyslexia and look at treatment or interventions, as you'll learn later on. Please stay with us.
Entrepreneurship is our business.
First month I made 100,000. I came up with specials, ideas. I'm like, I'm gonna make money. I'm gonna make a hell lot of money here.
Intentionally supporting your journey.
I mean, it's billions of money that are saved through stock trust. But this time around, we want to take those billions to build an economy.
Giving exposure to simple yet unconventional ideas.
We formulated this product for me and my brother for our beers to look the best version of themselves.
Helping to develop and sustain a thriving SME sector. This is our end goal.
I say I assist entrepreneurs to buy back their time and their sanity.
We get to network with like-minded entrepreneurs.
And our motivational quote for this week is from an unknown source, and it reads, "If you don't have big dreams and goals, you'll end up working for someone else that does."
This is SME On Point, and I'm Diabo Seto.
Let us now be mature. And I appeal especially to the political class. Don't divide these people, they don't deserve it.
Why?
Why what?
Why did you throw your name in the hat?
Well, I thought it was necessary to rise to the occasion.
There is a clause in the new legislation that allows for an applicant to go to the minister and get permission to campaign, for instance. Do you think that that is not a right approach?
No, that's totally undemocratic. It gives a lot of power to the Minister of Home Affairs of South Africa. Then he becomes the sheriff.
What is the profile of children at Tlhokomela Remedial School in Soweto?
Here we work with kids who are hard of hearing and also kids with specific learning difficulties. So you find that sometimes a child who is hard of hearing also has a specific learning difficulty, but some of them, they're just mainly hard of hearing. So with the ones with specific learning difficulties, you find that most of them, they have dyslexia. So they're unable to read, unable to write. It's actually really difficult for them to actually read something on text. But when you speak to them, they're able to communicate with you. When you ask them questions, they're able to respond. But when it comes to academic things, so it's difficult.
How is the learning program for dyslexic children designed?
We have the occupational therapist. We have myself, the speech pathologist and audiologist. We also have the school's counselor, or the educational psychologist. So basically, we assist the teachers on how to actually design a program that is better, or that's better suited for the kid. So we do our assessments, and after our assessments, we find out the strengths and the weakness of each and every learner. And then this is the information that we actually present to the teacher. So they in turn have to have an individual support plan. So we put these documents together to actually come up with a program that is better suited for each learner.
According to speech-language pathologist and audiologist Marupeng Kyale, the new technology available at this Soweto school makes assisting children in need much quicker.
This actually tests the hearing thresholds, like through tones and also through bone. So, and after the test is then that you will be able to determine the severity of the loss, if there is any hearing loss. So if it's mild, if it's moderate, or if it's severe, or if it's profound. And then from that information, then you decide if the child is actually a candidate for a hearing aid. So if a child is a candidate for a hearing aid and you feel like they would actually benefit from a hearing aid, then that's when you start with the process of getting them a hearing aid.
All right, so it appears that there's quite a lot that is considered when designing an intervention program. I've just been corrected that we can't really look at this as treatment, but it's an intervention program. Now, back to our guests here. Perhaps let's start with you, Benedict. In terms of the principles around, interventions, I think we've heard in this clip here all the tests that are done to determine strengths and weaknesses and so on. Let's just talk principles and who's involved, because I believe, there's a whole lot of people that are involved in assisting these children.
No, yeah, but just on a quick one, just to go back on the caller who spoke about language. We need to understand that culture is embedded in language.
Yeah.
So we can't negate any factor when it comes to such things living in this particular country and not actually look at issues like race.
I'll tell you what, we'll come back to you just now. I particularly would like to learn more about, having heard what, the audiologist said at school, do you relate to that kind of system where children get assessed right at the beginning?
Absolutely. I think you need data and not intuition and guesswork. I think you need to know where is the child.
Yeah.
Remembering every child's individual, there's no perfect landing point to start.
Yeah.
So where you're going to start, I'm particularly interested there in the strengths of the child.
Yes.
And I think that's where Jan's program picks up too, is exploit the strengths and use the strengths or their high interests, the sense of purpose. Why do they want to read? Why do they need to access that text?
Right.
So, and you can only do that with assessment. Use the assessment to keep your intervention honest. Is what you're doing delivering the result?
How many such schools do we have around the country? Obviously, I mean, we've heard of one in Soweto. Yours, Bella Vista.
Very few. So there's a number in the independent sector. There are a number in the state sector. It's grossly undersupplied as an option.
Right.
But government's intention is correct. We're moving towards an inclusion model.
Okay.
Our anxiety is how inclusive are we going to be of these children?
All right. Benedict, let me get back to you. I'm sure we sorted out all the technical glitches that we had before. Yeah, we're talking principles of the intervention and the people that are involved in the team.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I feel like for a better intervention to actually work adequately, we need to involve a few people. For instance, I really recommend an optometrist, because people tend to actually think that maybe my kid or my daughter cannot actually see, but it's not actually that. It's just to actually facilitate or stimulate how you can actually view, because you must also understand that dyslexia can't actually see things as words or pictures. So we're just stimulating that picture in a sense that we're ruling that out. Okay. So we need to have speech pathologists, we need to have psychologists. I normally assist in terms of ruling out the diagnosis and also just intervening in the more emotional part, providing or assisting in terms of building their self-esteem and self-confidence, because there's a lot of stigmatizations that actually comes with that, especially in mainstream schools. Why are you getting concessions? Why are you different? Why do you have somebody who reads to you when you're writing assessments, whereas we are not actually getting all of that? So that actually tends to negate. And I find myself treating more symptoms pertaining to the dyslexia, the depression, the anxiety, the isolation, the suicidality now, and also problems within the family settings also.
Yeah. That's going to be, excuse me, quite interesting. I mean, it's quite important for, the family to be stable enough to support the child that has, dyslexia. Jan, you a facilitator of this Davis dyslexia correction. Just tell us about that.
Well, it is basically the principle of verbal thinkers and visual thinkers. Verbal thinkers have self-talk. They can talk, and when they read aloud, they can hear the words, they understand it. The visual thinker not. That's why it's so cruel, actually, to let them stand up and read aloud in the class and so on. Now, as I said earlier, the moment they get confused by a word, in a sense, because it's all about words, there's nothing really else. The basic here, if we go to the root causes, which we try to do, is it's words that confuse them. That words cause disorientation. He's looking for a picture in his imagination, but now there are millions of other nice pictures, colorful, there's movies and stuff in his imagination, and he goes off on a imagination trip, sort of. No? Now the teachers see him, his eyes are glaring, he's not there, but the body is there and so on. Aha, ADD, he's not focusing, give him a tablet today, he will be focusing now. With that goes, as Benedict has said, all the other symptoms, when he is in that mode, and he's constantly, almost the whole day in that mode of disorientation, he loses track of reality. Just to be disorientated is if you stop at the stop street and the car next to you start moving, but you believe it's you that are moving. You might hit the brakes and then you say, hey, shucks, it was not me, it's that guy. You were disorientated at that moment. Your brain and all your senses gave you wrong information, but you believed it. Now, this is what this person with dyslexia is in that mode now. Now, he believes all that, but he's now living in an alternate world of his imagination. There's no beginning, there's no end, there's no real full logical story in whatever he's imagining. Now, to get out of that, as I say, schools are very fond of prescribing medication for that. But the other very popular solution nowadays is what you guys touched on, is concessions. Department allows certain concessions to assist the person with dyslexia because they know by now that people with dyslexia are highly intelligent. Right. It's just that the door to intelligence is closed at this stage. Now, the concessions mainly is that he might have allowed to have a reader in exams and tests. Somebody read the question because then he hears it. When he hears it, there's no dyslexia. He might have exemption from spelling. Spellings are not demarked, and also time, have longer time.
So these happen at normal schools?
That can happen, yes. But now the problem with that is what I have is that's fine until matric. Those concessions do not exist in university or college and the rest of life. Now, up until matric, he's got a reader reading it for him. He does perfectly well. He can get his distinctions, everything, because he's intelligent. It's just the blockage of reading itself is not taken away.
But
now,
why shouldn't that continue? Alison, why shouldn't that continue beyond?
As I understand, our alumni at university are receiving those concessions if there's a deep history and an established story. Right. But what you do want that person to enter the world of work is independent. So if you can introduce, I think we are so fortunate with technology and the software we could use, you would want that young adult before entering the workplace to be able to use the IT to help them.
Yeah. But talk about all of these interventions. I mean, they sound sophisticated, What about the cost element? I mean, they should cost quite a bit of money.
The greatest, it's principles pedagogy. So it's multisensory, overlearning, a very structured approach to mastering letters, sounds, words, sentences. So that in and of itself is good science, and it's not expensive. The difficulty is the manpower. If you really want to have the effective intervention, is very intense. You're going to be working one-to-one. In a remedial school, we're staffing 4-to-1, 4 children to every professional. And I think that intensity is difficult.
Okay.
And in that,
I'll tell you what,
parents,
we're very soon running out of time. I'm going to give each one of you 30 seconds.
Right.
Is there hope for children and adults with dyslexia? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to believe that there's very much hope actually in early interventions. I believe in that, but speaking from a racial background, coming from a different school in the rural areas, it's very much difficult. We need the assistance in, I don't know, tapping to the right elements or tapping to the right school. So I believe there's still hope.
10 seconds.
My basically gripe with these concessions is, what if you leave now out university and so if you go into a shop and you want to buy hair shampoo, you must be able to read at the back, is this for dry or wet hair or whatever. Now, where's the reader? Where's the amanuensis? Where's the logotite? I don't have it. What my first job interview is my reader, my mummy, whoever coming with me, my first induction course, I must study manuals.
Unfortunately, well, gentlemen and a lady,
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, it's been such an insightful discussion. And I'm sure our viewers out there learned quite a lot. And for you guys at home, thank you so much for staying with us. We're back with you again in a week's time. Same place, same time. And until then, please do take care.
Bus driver lost control of the bus in this road, and then it veered off-road, capsizing over downhill here.
It affected the whole community. For instance, my sister was the breadwinner, the only person at home.
Ma'am, is it a case of negligence from your part or poor servicing?
It has got nothing to do with negligence. An accident is something which is not planned.
It cannot be that a bus in Limpopo kills people, a bus here in 2015 kills people, nothing happens to the road, nothing happens to the bus company, and then it's business as usual.
From your organization perspective, a good move?
Of course, yes. We as an organization wholeheartedly welcome these special remission.
What does radical restructuring even mean?
Well, it means cutting deep. It looks like they need to remove about 2,000 staff, so that's radical stuff.
He's talking once again of a restructuring that we've done plenty of times. So to scapegoat Saka Numsa is highly irresponsible instead of dealing with the corruption and rot at this entity.
I could not accept the level of unconstitutionality that Minister Twele was now going through. I said to him that he doesn't have this authority to appoint people as ambassadors.